Hello, 10th graders. Welcome to week 5, lesson 22. Again, my name is Mr. Benson, and let's get started. For the joke of the day, what do you call a pepper that won't leave you alone? All up in your business. For today's lesson, you should be watching ELA G10 W5 lesson 22, which is the video you're watching right now. We're going to start reading a text called Money. And we're going to engage in a first read, but we're also going to analyze characterization of our main characters in the story. And then once you go down to lesson 22, you will see the materials you need for today. The lesson target for today is I can complete first read annotations to help with comprehension and future analysis of the text, as I just said. And just a reminder, we are reading a brand new text today. It's called Money. And although it's a brand new text, some of the themes in Money are actually very similar to themes in The Good Life. Let's quickly talk about what you're going to be doing today for the Read, Think, Talk, Write protocol. For the read section, there's a little bit of background information you have to read first. It says this poem features an element of American culture that is now almost entirely gone, door-to-door sales. Before the widespread use of media and telephones, salespeople would make unexpected stops at private homes in the hopes of selling their products or services. Many towns and cities have passed ordinances to regulate and restrict uninvited door-to-door solicitations, which is probably why we don't see it that often nowadays, because there's been a lot of ordinances passed to restrict or limit these door-to-door solicitations. And you're going to then read Money and engage in the first read routine, and you'll see that Money is a pretty interesting story, and it does relate to door-to-door solicitations, but there's a lot of parallels that could be drawn to today's society. And then what you're going to think about as you read is you're really going to think about the nature of the children's lives, but specifically you're going to ask yourself the following question. How do the parents deal with money and spending? How does this impact the way the children live? How might the spending habits of our parents and caregivers impact the way we see and spend money as we get older? So you're really going to think about how the parents in the story deal with spending and how that impacts the children of the story, but you're also going to think about how your parents or caregivers or even older siblings spent money and how that impacted the way that you spent and saw money as a whole. And then as a reminder, you're going to capture everything on your note catcher, and the note catcher is always on the next page, so make sure you find your note catcher so you can jot down your thoughts. For the talk section today, you're going to talk with a family member, caregiver, or friend about the following question. Is the speaker of the poem simply describing the family situation, or is the speaker criticizing something? Explain. So you got to really figure out, is the speaker just telling the story of this family, or are they criticizing something about the family and how they spend their money? And then the writing task will be around this idea that it's often said that our priorities and struggles are shown by the ways we spend our money. And after you read the poem Money, you should respond to the question, what lessons do the parents try to teach their children about spending and saving? What does this say about their priorities? So your goal today is really to think about and write a response to this question, to think about what lessons they're really trying to teach their children with their spending and saving habits, and what does this say about their priorities as a whole. And then just a friendly reminder that you should be writing down anything that's listed in bold in the lesson in the note catcher, which is found on the next page. And then as always, you're going to close out with the same two things. First, you're going to share your writing with someone. And then after you're done with everything, you're going to read a book for 20 minutes and make sure you document this reading in the reading log. Before we go over the model for today, I want to make sure you pause this video and complete the read, think, and talk part, because the model for today is going to be about the writing section. So I want you to finish those 3 parts first before we go over the model for the writing section. So the quick model today is going to be around the writing section, specifically with the lessons and priorities of the parents in the story, Money, in the poem Money. And if you read the actual writing section, you'll be reminded of the question you have to answer, which is, what lessons do the parents try to teach their children about spending and saving? What does this say about their priorities? So you really have to figure out 2 things. Number 1, what lessons are the parents trying to teach their children with their spending and saving habits? And number 2, what does all of this say about their priorities as a whole? Now, before I give you my thoughts on this question and sort of give you some examples, and then you can continue to work through examples on your own and then actually write the paragraph response, I wanted to quickly just recap what happened in the poem. I know you read it on your own in the first read, but I think it's important just for us to make sure we're on the same page, and for me to sort of think out loud in terms of what I found to be the most important key points of this story to help me understand the gist. So the poem really begins by us sort of watching the children react to their parents and how they react to the people that come to their door to sell them goods or services. So we have 3 different examples here of people coming to this family's door, and the parents come into the door to talk to them, and ultimately the parents decide to not buy the good or service that this person is offering. We don't actually know if they need the good or service, and they're not like necessarily rude or dismissive of the people out the door, but all of them end up not making the sale that they're trying to make, and for various different goods and services, but the outcome is the same. The family decides to not purchase the good or service. Then we sort of learn more about the spending habits of the family. So we learn like what the mother often buys, and like examples of what the mother buys for the family. So she gets things like school supplies and food, and she actually pays the kids to do the services around the house, like mowing the lawn, and even things like a sewing machine, which some would see as a want and not a need. She turns into something that is resourceful and money saving for her family, because her husband bought her the sewing machine as a present, but she ended up buying fabric and thread to be able to make clothes, dresses for her daughters. So she's turning this like luxury item into something that is actually going to save her family money in the long run. We also learned that they decide to give money to church pretty regularly. She talks about putting a dime or quarter into the collection plate at church. It may not seem like a lot of money now, but it actually probably was a lot of money back then. And we also learn about this little sealed white envelope that they give once a month, which we can infer is more money than just a dime or quarter. So I'm not going to go too much into detail about this, because in a future lesson you're going to unpack this a little bit more. But I do think it's interesting that this family, and specifically the mother, is so reluctant to give money to the needy people at the door when they're coming to, sell a good or service, but is really comfortable in giving that money to church. So I think that speaks a lot about them. And then we just learn a little bit more about the different things throughout time that people have been trying to sell this family at the door. Things like brooms, magazine subscriptions, raffle tickets, cookies, even services like yard work, ironing. And ultimately, each time, the parents turn these people away. They don't buy any of the goods or services. Again, they're not dismissive, and they recognize that they need help. They actually call them needy, which could have a negative connotation. It depends on how they're using it here, and I would argue they probably are using it a little bit negatively. But this just goes to show that no matter what it is, what the good or service is, even if they need it, they're just not comfortable in giving this money away to the people that are at the door. And then the poem ends by just talking about like the family as a whole and some of their habits. So we learned about the father leaving for work every day, coming home early, and then coming home after work and then eating dinner, and then going and back and doing the same thing each day, even on Saturday. And so that obviously shows that he's a hard worker and doesn't really do much besides work and provide for his family because he's gone a lot. And then we learn that the mother opens up a savings account for each child, and she puts in money. So she's taking the money she's, her husband's earning or that she's earning in other ways, and is putting it into a savings account for the children, which makes them happy to feel like they have a future, and they see their name on the checkbooks, and they get excited. But then they start to think about like what their life is going to be like when these situations happen to them when they are older. And by that I mean like the children. So they sort of see all of this as like a mystery. That's the word they describe to you. They use to describe this experience. Mainly the experience of people coming to the door and selling different goods and services. It's sort of like a mystery, and they get pleasure out of it. But the pleasure really is around this idea of like who's going to come to the door, and like how are they essentially going to turn them away? Because the last sentence here says he too was turned away. So they're just talking about in the future when someone comes and tries to sell them something, they already know that this person's going to be turned away. So it's very clear that the spending habits of the parents and the saving habits of the parents are directly influencing at least what the kids think they're going to be like when they get older. Like sometimes people change, when they're older, and when you're a kid, you really think your life is going to be very similar to what your parents' life is like. So there is a world where these kids grow up and they do the opposite. They decide to give money to all of the people that come to their door. But the way that it's described here, it very much seems like the plan right now is that because this is all the kids know, that they're going to grow up and sort of mimic their parents' spending and saving habits. So if I think about the writing question, it's a two-part question, as I said before. And the first part is thinking about what lessons do the parents try to teach their children about spending and saving. So there's like a bunch of lessons you could pull out from this. I'm only going to go over 2 with you. You can feel free to use the 2 that I go over, or you can choose to come up with your own lessons. But these are the 2 big lessons that I saw that I pulled out from the text. So I think the first lesson they're trying to teach their children is that spending and saving is important for personal and familial gain. So you notice that they do spend money and they do save money, but it's really only just for themselves and for familial gain. The only exception is with church, and we can dig into that a little bit later. And like I said, you're going to dig into that in a future lesson. But for the most part, you wouldn't call them cheap per se, because they are spending money, but they're really just doing it in a way that's going to benefit them. And but by them, I mean them as people, like the parents, but also the rest of their family too. They definitely care about their kids and their future too. The second lesson I pulled out is that working hard equals opportunity and wealth. They don't get things handed to them. That was made very clear by the paragraph where it described the father's working habits, how often he works. And they also put the kids to work a lot too. They tell the kids to mow the lawn. The mother, is making the clothes for the children. She's not buying it herself. She's buying the fabric, but she's not buying the dresses or the clothes from the store. She's doing it herself. So they very much value hard work, and they're trying to instill that in their kids. But they don't necessarily ever understand, or at least allude to the fact that sometimes there are other factors in life that can contribute to how much money you have. It's very clear that the people that come to their door every day, are working hard. They're going door to door trying to sell goods and services and make an honest living. But the family doesn't see that as the same as what they're doing. If they did, they probably would give them some money. But it almost seems like they feel like they're a little bit superior to those people, because they're they think their living is probably quote unquote more honest than the people that go from door to door. So while they do recognize that working hard is the key to opportunity and wealth, that they don't necessarily realize there are other factors at play that could make it harder for people to not just work hard and get what they want or what they need. Now, the second question asks you to take these lessons and make a inference about what this says about their priorities as a whole. So I listed out some priorities here that connect to these lessons. First, family. It's clear that the parents have a huge love for their family, and it's a big priority to them. Generational wealth. They talk a lot about passing on wealth to their family members, the kids, and then the kids also just talk about repeating the same process when they are adults as well. Hard work, which connects to this idea of we should work hard to get what we want and that we can provide for ourselves. Personal happiness, with the exception of donating to church, which I would argue is still contributing to their personal happiness because their religion is probably important to them. They spend and save money really only on personal things that will make them personally happy. And they also are very strategic about how they spend money, and they have a plan for everything. They don't just dump their money into resources that won't be useful for them. They very much have a plan and an idea, even a budget around what they want to spend money on, and they're very careful about the choices they make when it comes to financial decisions. So overall, I just took what I knew from the story and I came up with like 2 big lessons that I thought the parents were trying to teach their children about spending and saving. And I took those lessons and came up with some priorities as a whole about the parents. And so you can do the same exact process, follow the same exact process. I definitely recommend going back to your notes in the story and reread it again if you have to. But you should also first brainstorm what the lessons are that you think the parents are teaching their children, and then from there generate a list of priorities. And you can feel free to use my 2 examples. I also would encourage you to find at least 1 more, or you can just start from scratch and come up with your own. Tomorrow's lesson will be lesson 23, and the learning target is I can complete close read annotations to analyze characterization present in a poetry selection. So just like you did on Tuesday with close reading of the poem Good Life, you're going to also engage in a close read of this poem, Money, and analyze characterization a little bit more about the parents and the children. As always, thank you so much for learning with me today. It was a pleasure. A few quick reminders. Number 1, don't forget to talk about your lesson with someone. Number 2, read 20 minutes and complete a reading log entry. The reading log is at the front of your packet, so make sure you go back to the front of your packet to find the reading log. And number 3, practice reading fluency using the first or second page of your weekly reading. So if you forgot everything about fluency, that's okay. Go back to the front of your packet. There's directions there, and you can use your weekly reading for the fluency work. As always, email your teacher if you need any support. You should know their email by now, but in case you don't, this is an example of how an email would look in the district. It's just the first name, that last name, @DetroitK12.org. Hope everyone has a great day, and to remember, keep learning.